Hey, it's your pal Mike Shea from the website Sly Flourish and author of the books The Lazy Dungeon Master and Sly Flourish's Fantastic Locations. I'm going to be hosting a brand new show on the Don't Split the Podcast network called the DM's Deep Dive. Each month, I'll be talking to a member of the D&D community about a particular topic of the game like encounter design, tools for improvisation, and game pacing. You can subscribe to the show through iTunes, on Twitch, or on YouTube. Join me, and we'll all work together to make our games fantastic.
This is Tabletop Babble. I'm James Introcaso. Well, it happened. By popular demand, MT Black, Tony Petrecka, and Jeff C. Stevens are back on the show to talk more about designing adventures. We talk a little bit about designing adventures for your home game. We talk a little bit about designing adventures for the DM's Guild. They are some best-selling authors on the DM's Guild. So it is a really, really great conversation. I guarantee this is not the last time we're going to have the three of them on. I'd love to know who some of your favorite designers are, because I'd love to get them on the show as well. So tweet me at James Introcaso. That's at JamesIntrocaso, or you can tweet the show at Tabletop Babble. Okay, let me roll this awesome discussion with them. All right, everybody, now I am here with three of the greatest designers that I've ever had the privilege to talk to, and now we're all gonna be in a book together. Maybe we'll touch on that a little bit later. You may remember them from the last time we talked about adventure design, but I have MT Black, Tony Petrecka, and Jeff C. Stevens with me. So why don't we we'll go around the table, reintroduce yourselves to the audience. I will say, if you didn't hear our first episode, I recommend going back into the Tabletop Babble archives and listening to our first discussion about adventure design. You can find it linked in the show notes for this episode as well over at don'tsplitthepodcastnetwork.com, because short URLs are for people who like marketing. So why don't we go ahead and we'll start with you, Tony Petrecka. Why don't you tell the people out there who you are and what you do in the world of tabletop role-playing games?
Well, hi, everybody. I'm Tony Petrecka, just as I was introduced. And, I'm a D&D player since, 1980 or so, and have certainly played plenty of other role-playing games and tabletop games, board games, etc. But D&D is where my heart and soul lies. And I have recently, as of the last couple of years, got into writing and publishing. Been a DM that entire time, but got into publishing on the DM's Guild. And for those of you who don't know, you can go find Journey Through the Center of the Underdark, Journey Through the Center of the Underdark Part 2. And my most recent, Killer Kobolds, which I'm very proud of. Great adventure, tons of fun to run. So, go out and buy 10 copies for all of your friends.
Yes, absolutely. Go out and buy 10 copies for all of your friends so that we keep getting wonderful material from this amazing human being and designer. And super fun. Dare I say, one of the greatest, if not the greatest book for using kobolds in any adventure, hands down. There's lots of them out there, but this is the very top of the kobold heap. So yeah, and well play-tested, great art. It's just a really, really nice product. So
thanks.
Thank you for that. And then, of course, we have with us Jeff Stevens. Jeff, why don't you tell the people out there who you are and what you do?
Hello, everyone. I have started publishing on the DM's Guild, started last June. I had never DM'd before, and I started that up about 2 years ago and really enjoyed it. And I thought, well, I'd put my creations into paper and started just trying to publish on the Dungeon Masters Guild, and I've had a blast doing it, and my mind doesn't stop creating adventures, and so I just keep on printing.
That's a great way to put it. You've got a gift, my friend, and yeah, you've got a ton of stuff out there. You have a collection that's among the top sellers as well. So if you want to get a lot of the good stuff that Jeff has produced, he's put it all into a low reduced price package for you. So definitely check that out. And then, of course, speaking of top sellers on the DM's Guild, MT Black, why don't you tell people a little bit about what you do, and feel free to brag.
MT Black, calling in from Sydney here. Yeah, adventure writer, long-term player like Tony. I've probably been playing for about as long. And folk might know me from the Complete Adventures of MT Black, which has been selling very well for a while now.
Yes, yeah. I believe last time we talked, it was #1 on the DMs Guild, and last I
Still
checked,
is.
it is still #1 on the DMs Guild, and that's because it's a set of amazing adventures for a really, really great value. We're talking less than $1 in adventure, people. They're really nice adventures that all three of these gentlemen have created, which is why I'm so excited to have them back on to continue our discussion about adventure design. And what I want to kick it off with, so last time, we sort of covered the basics, what makes a great adventure, how to get noticed on the guild if you want to sell your adventures, covering homebrew and stuff like that. One big thing that, Tony, you had mentioned when we first started talking about doing another one of these that I would love to talk about because it really does mystify me is sort of layout and art and layout and how to not make it look like, oh, that guy just did that in Word. That is one of the biggest problems I have when I'm putting together a product for the DMs Guild. Like, how do I, we talked about where to find good art last time, and we talked about all that kind of stuff, but really, layout, mind-boggling. So why don't you start with that, Tony, because it is really important. I think the way an adventure is laid out contributes to how professional it is treated then by the community. It makes a difference between an amateur and a professional product, I think. But then it also really functionality is so important with your layout. The way your information is organized really makes a difference in how easy an adventure is to run.
So, amen. And for my part, I've utilized a template that was available and enhanced it with insertions of art, etc. But in utilizing said template, you have to lay out the actual data that's in your product in a logical fashion. I think you really need to ensure that you've got an introductory section that lets everybody know what's going on. That you've got various size headers that make it obvious and logical that topic A/1 is under this heading of chapter 1. Here's the introduction, or chapter 2, we're off to the dungeon, etc. So that your readers and ultimately so that your DM, that is your target audience, can easily absorb what's going on and understand the logic of the situation. Having it in an attractive package just helps it sell that much better, helps people accept that this is in fact a professional product. And that attractive package, it might be a template, which I think I've managed to pull off, and it might very well be hiring a layout person, which I think Jeff is doing these days. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, and MT as well. And I'm quite frankly looking into that. But absolutely no doubt about it, the presentation of the product is critical to its success, to its believability, and to its acceptance by others as something that they want to think, well, this isn't just homebrew. This really is somebody that knew what they were doing. Unfortunately, first impressions are important.
Yeah, I totally agree. So Jeff and MT, Tony mentioned you guys are looking into outsourcing your layout now that you've had a couple of successful adventures, a couple being the largest understatement probably ever. Now that you've all had several adventures, you've got a little bit of money that you can sort of put back into the business of making adventures. Where do you find people to do layout? People who organize text and are essentially designers. Where do you find these people?
This is Jeff, and I had been in contact with Benoit de Bernardi of Goblinstone. He wrote The Banquet of the Damned, and we have been chatting back and forth, and his layout is just amazing. It looks, almost like WotC. And so I said, well, how do you do this? And so he told me about InDesign and everything, and I downloaded InDesign, opened it up, and I said, there's no way I'm learning this. It's going to take me a few months to learn out how to do this. So he and I had talked about it, and he offered to do it for me. And so, I've been paying him to do it, and the product looks great. My last two products have just worked out really well. The layouts look great on them.
Nice. That's awesome. And that is another great adventure, Banquet of the Damned. People should definitely check that out as well. And I think as far as layout goes, that can, in general, be one of the cheaper things to outsource, it seems. And not that you should always pay people what they're worth. You should never shortchange anybody. But it does seem to be a thing that maybe a person can take on multiple projects at once. And so they're able to do multiple layouts and therefore collect maybe a bit of a smaller fee than they would for, say, if they were drawing you a cover image from scratch. What about you, MT? Where do you find layout folks?
So I've been using James, you obviously put me on to Liz Courts, who I've been using for my last 3 adventures, and we'll be working with for the foreseeable future, I imagine. And she's been terrific. In terms of finding people, though, because I outsource a lot of the work I do at the moment just to try and keep the quality up, to keep the throughput going, and oftentimes I look at adventures I like the look of, like I'll see art that I like the look of, or there might be layout you like the look of, or cartography, and then just check the credits. You go and look at both at the DM's Guild or RPG Now, find the products you like the look of, and check the credits. Then you can Google the people up, and very often they'll have a website, and they'll be looking for freelance work. So it's a little time consuming, but I feel like building that network of contacts is one of the things you're going to need to do if you're going to be serious about producing content for the guild or RPG Now. And part of it is just building up that stable of writers, editors, artists, layout folk. That's been one of the biggest assets I've acquired over the year or so I've been doing this, is a whole network of contacts.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the Dungeon Masters Guild fan club is a group on Facebook that seems to be very supportive of each other's work. And granted, there's people there, too, who are just sort of fans of stuff, but it does seem like there's a lot of creators there talking, sharing images, and that has been really, really helpful as well. Along the lines of connecting with people, Jeff, you had said one of the big pieces of advice you have for somebody who wants to publish their adventures is to connect with other writers, and that MT and Tony in particular have had a big impact on your writing and success on the guild. So I was hoping you could talk a little bit more about that, about how to connect with other people and,
Sure.
and how to make those contacts.
Certainly, yeah. MT and Tony, right when I first started, I sent Tony my House of the Midnight Violet, and he read it over, and he gave me some tips on that. And MT came to me with when I published another one, I can't remember which one it was, but and said that you did pretty good here, but you need to do this and this and this. And so it's people looking at your stuff, and then also yourself as the writer going out to other writers and saying, hey, can you look this over? Give me an idea of what you think of this. Does it make sense? Because there's a lot of stuff on the guild that if somebody else had looked over it would be so much more better. It would just take it up another level, because as a first-time writer, when I published, I didn't have anyone else look at it other than, maybe a proofreader. And that person doesn't know how to write an adventure. They're just reading it for edits and this and grammar errors and that type of thing. But when another publisher or writer reads it, they're going to pick up on things that you missed. And that's really important. As far as how to connect with people, Twitter, Facebook, the DM's Guild fan club, and also a lot of us have our contact information in our adventures. So if you were to pick up one of our adventures and read them, I know my email address and either the Twitter handle or Facebook handle are on there also. But really, it's a matter of going out there, picking up other writers' stuff, reading them, contacting them, and saying, hey, what influenced you? Do you have any tips for me if I'm going to start out writing? And really learning from others. And plus, if you're gonna do that, you need to be able to accept the criticism you receive back. There's one thing to think that you're a great writer, but when you hear, well, you need to do this better, this better, this better, this didn't make sense, you have to accept that and learn how to grow from those words that you've received back. That's really important.
Yeah, I think that is huge. We talked about how much playtesting is worth last time, which is a lot. And I think feedback, especially someone who is an accomplished author on the guild who would be taking their time out to give you the feedback, I would definitely pay attention to those points and think about the questions you're being asked, and also know that I feel like we're still in this community of RPGs where kind of a rising tide lifts all ships, right? Like, we have the three of you on, yep. And some might look at this and say, well, all of you are competitors, right? We all have adventures on the guild, and we're all, but I don't look at it that way. I look at it as the more people who buy adventures from one of us, the more likely they are to buy adventures from all of us, right? Yep. And so we all want the quality of the guild to be good. We want the reputation of the guild to be strong. And so that's why people are taking their time out to to do this. And it's also, pay it forward. People did it for you. You'll do it for them. So, Tony, what do you think about connecting with others? How do you do it, and how do you get them to take the time to give you feedback?
Oh, sure. First of all, don't be shy. Go ahead and ask those questions. And you've already mentioned some of the obvious resources. The DMs Guild Fan Club is a wonderful community of folks that are supporting each other. And you can shout out publicly there with your questions. You can certainly message folks privately, and they're going to respond to you. And once you do, again, just as Jeff pointed out, be receptive to what you hear, and don't take it personally, and don't have an ego easily bruised because some of the feedback you get. Absorb it and understand that it's going to be useful to improving your product, and certainly that should be the end goal.
And that was really my biggest mistake when I first started publishing, was thinking that other writers weren't going to work with me because they thought it was a competitive market. I wish I had gone back before I published my first to say, hey, would you look this over? Give me your thoughts thing. Because the community is really helpful. I mean, there's not been one individual that I've not contacted. There's a bunch of people that I chat with on Twitter and Facebook that are writers, and it's just a great community. And I wish I'd gone, if I could go back and do it again, I'd have somebody else read it first before I published. Now I have tons of readers.
Yeah. And I think we're definitely going to get to that too, because I think we should talk about how to respond to the consumer as well. But MT, one thing, just sort of on this note, you have said you're outsourcing a lot these days. How do you do that then? Like, what's the reverse? How do you find good people that you trust to work with, and then what's that process like? We talked about that a little bit, but as far as you giving feedback, when somebody comes to you and says, hey, here's a draft of something I did for you, or hey, would you look over this for me? How is that give and take? How does that work for you?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. In terms of locating writers, when I first started looking for freelancers, I looked for people who had products on the Guild. Actually, I was looking for other fresh voices, people who had products on the Guild that looked like good quality products, but which hadn't sold well, so hadn't got any medals. So I guess I was looking for undiscovered gems, and also people who didn't look like they were kind of trying to build up a stable of products. People who may have just written one or two products and then left it there. So I approached them through various ways. Some of them had contact information. Some of them I just left a message on the DMs Guild saying, hey, how can I get in touch with you? It really varied. Some people I Googled and so on and so forth. That's how I discovered the earlier writers I was interacting with. It's become a bit easier as I've gone on. Again, as more people kind of know me, other people have recommended writers. Jeff has said, hey, you should check out this guy, and so on. He sent me a few names, and other folk have approached me as well. But in the early days, that's how I did that. In terms of giving feedback on the drafts that get sent in, I'll be honest, I'm not sure if my method is the best one or the way to interact with people. But what I've often found, I think, is I ask people to submit a quality draft, not a first draft, but a quality draft of the product, the product that they feel comfortable sending forth and potentially moving on to publication. My experience has been generally when I give feedback at that stage is there's often the energy has been expended in preparing that draft. So if I think a manuscript has to take a big left turn somewhere, I'd be more likely to do that myself in development rather than say, hey, I think you need to do this, that, and the other, and send it back to the actual writer. Again, that's just been my experience. I feel like usually the product that they've given to me is their, it's kind of used to their contribution, and probably in 80% of cases I've accepted the first draft that they've submitted. Not that should be the first draft, but the first draft they've submitted to me I've usually taken. If I think it needs significant further development, I'll probably do that myself. working with an editor. So probably other creators and other editors can probably give me feedback there on that whole matter. But I found it usually hasn't worked that well, giving feedback and saying, hey, change this, change this, change this. Usually they've submitted the product that's their vision of how that product should work, and then I need some other brains on it if I need to take it in a different direction.
I like that a lot. That's a really cool process. It's neat you've created this assembly line for adventures, which I think is amazing, but it's so adaptable and you can keep that artistic flow within there too, which is great.
Yeah. Actually, like one thing I've done sometimes, if a product's come back to me and I've thought this needs a bit more work, I've shot it over to another writer and just said, here's some money. Can you just go through and punch this up for me? And some of my products, even though they're relatively short, I've had 4 or 5 creators and editors working on them. The quality of the product reflects that. Like Firestone, Beneath the Ruins of Firestone Keep was like that, I think, where I got a lot of different people to contribute different parts to that, and that was certainly reflected in the final quality of the product. So, and I've noticed too, you look at a lot of the professional products from the old days like TSR and WotC as well, they would often have a lot of editors working on the product. So I think getting a lot of different brains on something, sometimes people just bring 1 or 2 really good ideas to the table that can really transform something. So I'm a big believer now in getting a lot of input into the product that way.
Totally, and I think that makes a lot of sense. It's collaborative, and certainly if everybody can work together, many heads I think make for a better product, provided everybody works well together. All right, I just wanted to take a quick break to let you know about this week's sponsor, Audible.com. Thank you so much to them for offering you, the listeners of Tabletop Babble, a free 30-day trial of their audiobook service, plus a free audiobook of your choice. My recommendation to you is Sherlock Holmes, those stories by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, read by Stephen Fry. What? You can get 62 hours of Stephen Fry goodness sent right to your ears for free if you go to audibletrial.com/DSPN, or you could get any of the thousands of audiobooks that Audible has to offer at audibletrial.com/DSPN. All right, let's get back to the show. Let's talk a little bit about, Jeff, you had sort of hinted at this when we were talking, and Tony, you did too, and MT, the community of people who are buying these adventures. So if you want to, you're putting up adventures on the DMs Guild and people want to, let's say, maybe buy one of your adventures, and then the feedback starts to roll in, right? And these are not necessarily, right, this is a different community of people. These are not necessarily people you've asked to playtest. These are not other designers that you have asked the opinion of. These are people who have purchased your product, who are leaving feedback. Sometimes it's left in the form of a review on the DMs Guild. Sometimes it's left in the form of a comment on the DMs Guild. Sometimes people reach out on Twitter. Sometimes people have a blog like the amazing Merrick Blackman, and they'll leave a review. So you've got all of these sorts of comments and feedbacks flying in. Sometimes you'll get a review, or rather a rating, that doesn't come with a review attached. You'll just get 1 star, and there won't be any explanation as to why, and you kind of got to live with it. So interacting with the community, what is the way to do that? Because I know sometimes the internet can be amazing. You can get a note that really makes your day. The other day I got a note from somebody that said, hey, just wanted to let you know I used to steal RPG products, and because you've had a lot of creators on your show talking about how hard it is to make a living, I don't do that anymore, and thank you for doing that, right? Like, that note made my day. And then sometimes you get a note that, like, you're the worst person in the world because you liked something somebody else didn't, and you lose your faith in humanity. That's the internet for you.
Right.
So how do you guys interface? Because you're all putting out products. You're clearly not beaten down by this sort of grind of sometimes people can be crappy to you. So what do you do? Tony, let's start with you. How do you sort of interact with the community, and how do you deal with, say, a critical comment when you get it, maybe on something that you've created?
I'm fortunate to have had a whole bunch of positive feedback from customer reviews, which has been wonderful. And it absolutely, as you pointed out, it makes your day. I love seeing unsolicited positive things being said about what I put out. Of course, it boosts my ego, but it also thrills me to know that other people are enjoying it, because that's the whole point of getting into this. The whole point of being a DM is to get my players to have a good time. So the fact that I might be allowing people from all over the world to have a good time just exponentially increases the pleasure I receive from being a DM. Insofar as negatives go, when it comes to actual comments on any of my individual products, I've had a couple people point out some errors in the products, and I don't see those as negatives. I certainly don't take it personally. I say, hey, thanks, and I go take a look, and sure enough, there's the typo that I missed and somebody else missed, and, happy to correct it. In the broader internet world, I certainly participate in a whole bunch of different Facebook forums as more or less an active participant. It's wise to stay positive and to avoid any of the flame wars that might occasionally spur up, and I usually take my own advice on that. And it's wise to say nothing but good things about other folks, say nothing but good things about other folks' products, help each other out, and don't take personally anybody that might happen to come at you in a situation. It hasn't occurred to me much, but I wouldn't take it personally, and I would try to walk away from that.
Yeah, absolutely. I do love when somebody gives me a free editing pass and points out a typo maybe, or like, oh, this could be clearer. That sort of constructive feedback, I think, is sure. Great to hear from consumers. And I think it's right. It's about keeping a level head if you can. Jeff, you were the one who sort of, again, brought this topic up about interacting with your consumer base. How do you approach that?
As much as I can, actually. I want to hear feedback from people. I want to see ratings on my products. I want to see comments and discussions, because then we know we're doing a good job. And if we're not, you can make a note on there. If it's something really bad, I would ask that you just email me or contact me a different way other than, put it on the guild and give me a chance to make the corrections before you go out there and write a lengthy discussion as to what you don't like. I mean, I don't want to say don't make your comments, but I'd rather that go through me directly so I can make the updates first and see if that corrects the issue. I put my email and everything on my modules for communication with my end user, my customers. And so I hope that they would contact me with anything really bad. So far I haven't had that. I've had suggestions and everything's been good, but in the off case that I do have something like that's the way I would want to be contacted if it was a really poor rating or something didn't jive well with somebody, or I really ticked somebody off with something, because you don't see those kind of reviews very often, and it could just be a misunderstanding of something I wrote and they just read it wrong. Just give me a chance to make that right. But as far as positive feedback and comments, I want to hear from that. I want to interact with you. Dungeon Masters Guild's fan club is a great way to do that. Following on Twitter, Facebook, messaging me, easy way to do that, because I want to become a better writer. And you pointing out the things that I did wrong is going to help me, and you pointing out the things that I did right is going to help me even more. I want to know that I'm getting better. I've started as a decent writer. I feel like I'm becoming a better writer every time I write. And so hearing your positive words back, and even your critical words, is really important to me.
Yeah, I agree. I think, one of the things that you're sort of touching on is a problem is like, it's hard to get reviews. You see these products that are platinum rated sometimes, platinum bestsellers, and they have like 3 reviews. Right. MT, what about you? How do you feel about your feedback and stuff on the guild?
Yeah, much the same as the other guys. The ratings are important. As you know, with your podcast, the way this thing works is really the 5-star ratings are the keys. The products that sell very well tend to be in the 4 point something in terms of their rating average. So you certainly hanker after the 5-star reviews. Like Tony said, it is such a boost when someone leaves you feedback and says, we just had a great time. I'm not trying to create amazing art here. I'm trying to create a fun game experience for people. And when people leave me feedback and said, we played the game 3-4 hours, we went through it, and we all just had a blast. That's fantastic feedback. It's very hard when people leave low reviews and there's no commentary at all.
Agreed.
One of my earliest bundles, the Tribal Trilogy, which was generally rated very well, and then someone came along and just left a very low star review on it with no comments at all. And I'm thinking, gosh, I was selling this so cheaply. I just wanted to know what the thinking was. What was your problem with this product? But, there's not much you can do about it. And sometimes you'll get someone who'll say, I thought this was a great product, but there was I'm taking off a star because I found a grammar error on page 13, and you just want to tear your hair out.
Those people have definitely never written an adventure, it feels like.
Yeah. As a creator, any sort of a creator, artist, the critics are part of it, and if you can't live with that sort of thing happening, you're probably going to struggle to put product out into the world for sale.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, yep. And along those lines of being there, making a product for people to have fun, just switching gears, because this is some advice I think that people who either want to write an adventure or just want to design a great adventure for their home group can use. MT, you brought this up, designing fun encounters. I think the more I DM, the harder that becomes, because especially if you play with the same group all the time, it's like, I don't want to bust out that old trick again. Like I have used lots of encounters where the characters are running somewhere and the ground starts to fall out beneath them, or some version of that, where it's like, you got to keep moving, or that sort of thing. How do you come up with interesting encounters that are fun, that are engaging, and that are important to the story, right? So, MT, why don't you kick off that conversation?
Yeah, what a huge topic this is. This is I
this is a
wrestle
whole
with
podcast
this.
in itself. I feel like.
Yeah.
This is a series of podcasts. I wrestle with this. It's almost the number one thing I'm thinking about and trying to develop my skills at. I think I mentioned this last time we spoke. I think overall with an encounter, there are two things you want. You want consistency and contrast to make encounters work. You want contrast, by which I mean kind of variability. You want there to be different things happening. It just can't be beating up 6 goblins every time. But you also need that consistency. That I'll stumble over the word, but the verisimilitude, which they talk about a lot in fiction creation. The believability. The encounters have to make sense within the overall storyline. Now, I've come up with a whole bunch of different tricks. I've got, I love my tables, and I've been preparing my own tables to give me different ways of adding contrast to an encounter. One way to do that is to vary the monsters. So you might be fighting a goblin, but the goblin in this case is giant-sized for some reason. It's a 12-foot tall goblin who has the stats of an ogre, for example. So that's something that they haven't seen before, something that's a bit different, or perhaps the monster has extra limbs, perhaps the monster's wearing dreadnought-style armour. All these sort of things you can throw into a monster to give it a bit of variation. You can also add complications, and I know, James, you wrote a very good post on this a couple of years ago, I thought, about adding complexity into combat. You can have environmental complexity, obviously. So as you said, the ground can drop out from you. You could be on a slippery slope of some sort. The combat could happen when the PCs are climbing up a rope, for example, to get to the next level, and suddenly they're having a combat hanging from the rope. There can be different tactics the monsters use. For example, they can pretend to retreat and then then have an ambush, lead them into an ambush. Perhaps someone as unexpectedly turns out to have spell-like abilities. There's a whole bunch of things like that you can do to add variety into your combat encounters. The only thing is, and I think you touched on it as well, is be careful not to overdo it or try to be too clever. One of the really surprising things I've discovered probably the last 6-7 months is some of the adventures I've put out there where I've really felt like, as a creator, I want to do something really, really different. I've put it out there and it's been well received. And then I've put other adventures out there. Firestone Keep is a good example, which I thought of. It's just really a very straightforward dungeon crawl. And sometimes, the adventure that's got back to basics and just kind of done the basic things well has been even more warmly received than the adventure that you think, wow, I've put 6 really amazing ideas in there that no one's ever seen before. D&D combat is fun by its nature. There's lots of options. There's, even if you're just going out of the book, there are so many good, interesting choices the players can make. I think you don't want to you don't want to spread your jam too thickly on the bread there either. So that's part of the balance I'm trying to achieve, and I've probably only shared about 5% of my thoughts on that there as well. So, but I'll let the other guys chime in.
Well, thank you so much for talking about that post on World Builder blog. That is one of my favorites, and it is true. Like, there's a balance to the layers of complexity you want to add to combat. It's like my 4th edition brain is like, oh yeah, we could do all of these things, and then my 5th edition brain is like, right, but you also want to like do other things than just this one encounter tonight, because you don't want your players to fall asleep between turns at the table, and you don't want to get lost in kind of the hustle of it all. What do you think, Tony? You've designed a lot of encounters and had a lot of success with those encounters. You play test them hard. You really, I would say, like, that's one of your huge strengths. What do you think makes a good encounter?
Well, it certainly you've touched on the balancing act that's there, and that's worth emphasizing even yet again. The encounter needs to be exciting for your players. Probably need perhaps some terrain elements, perhaps some enemies maybe coming from different directions, etc. Possibly multiple types of enemies. However, when you get to a point where you've had complexity upon complexity upon complexity, it might get a little overwhelming for you as a DM to run it, for another DM to run it. So there's perhaps a balancing act in that, okay, you need some minions, maybe you need a spellcaster, maybe you need some archers, but let's not then also throw in yet a 4th element and have the environment exploding at the same time. A careful balance to keep it just complex and interesting enough that it's entertaining and it keeps people on their toes, while also not having the DM left there scratching their head, what the heck was I supposed to do this round with this particular battle? The setting contributes to the encounter as far as I'm concerned. Is it, for a recent example, is it in a canyon with swooping flying kobolds coming down at it? Right there, that can make it exciting. A canyon with swooping down flying kobolds that happen to also have breath weapons and missile weapons. We've just added maybe just enough complexity to keep the players on their toes.
It's terrifying.
without overwhelming the table with too much to pay attention to. So I think that balance is absolutely critical. And then I think MT was getting at verisimilitude, big word there for it. Believability within the world that you're setting up, believability within the adventure that you're setting up is critical to keep the players engaged.
Absolutely. Jeff, you put out a book of encounters that you had lots and lots of authors contribute to for Storm King's Thunder. And then we alluded to at the beginning of this discussion, you're putting out another book of encounters that you have asked everybody here, including me, to contribute to, which I think is going to be a lot of awesome. So what are you looking for when we design good encounters? What do you think makes an awesome encounter?
Basically, what I put out to each of the writers was, give me something different. I don't want everything combat. I don't want, because when you think of a city encounter, you may think bandits in the corner or assassins hiding or stuff like that. I wanted something out of the box, and I've received so many fantastic encounters on this. I mean, the people who pick this up are really gonna be excited about it. I think. I know I am, from what I've read, and I'm still waiting on more submissions, and then hopefully, maybe out in a couple months. I haven't set a specific date yet, but I want those things that are going to catch people off guard. Just like Tony and MT had said, you may have a goblin, but maybe he's a giant goblin, or with Tony, the breath weapon kobolds. That's something that's going to perk up the audience, the players, and they're going to be, what just happened? It's going to change the game right there when they're playing. And that's the kind of thing I'm working for. Now, I don't use tables. I want to. I just picked up Matt Finch's book, which MT has suggested a few times, and I'm still digging through that, because I think tables get me out of my mindset of what I want to write. When I write an encounter, I try and make it flow with the story to make it fit. But when I'm just trying to come up with random encounters for like a book, that's why I've gone out to multiple writers and say, hey, could you contribute an encounter to this book? because I don't want every encounter in this book to sound like it's my writing. I want different ideas. I want people to see different things, different viewpoints, different ideas from other DMs and other writers. I want to get into the tables just to see where it takes me, but as to this point right now, I've not used those. But I can definitely see them as a great tool to use, especially when you're stuck as like, well, what's going to happen right here? You know, maybe roll the dice, see what happens, and then from that result, you can even tweak it to make it fit even better into what you're playing or your adventure.
Agreed. And I also think that sort of brings me to the next point. You're talking about getting a lot of minds in there, contributing to those things so that you have variety. I think reading other people's work is huge in sparking your own ideas, right? Because it's like, definitely. Oh, look what they did. I can apply this theory over here, right? And so go ahead, Jeff, because I think this applies not just to encounters, right? This applies to anything. I think there's a lot of people who think, myself included, well, I've written adventures since I was 10. I can write an adventure and put it on the guild. And it's like, oh yeah, but if you haven't read other people's work, maybe you can't. Right. You know, that is the place to start, I feel like. So talk a little bit about that.
I agree with you. Reading other adventure writers on the DM's Guild, you know, bring in one of the bestsellers and take a look at it and say, oh, well, this is what this guy did, and maybe I am writing too much and I can shorten this down. You know, I've had feedback and reviews that have said that I need to tighten up my writing. I need to shorten my dialogue, that type of thing. And I try and keep that into perspective and use those reviews and those comments. But in the same point, I'm my own writer. You know, I write the way I write, and so I may make some adjustments, but in the end, it's going to be my own work because I don't want to write just like everyone else. But if you're picking up another product on the guild, you can see how the layout works, what works for them, and what makes a great product. And that's not just the guild; that's also old modules, current WotC campaigns, that type of thing. You know, read over those and see. Well, this is how you're supposed to write this. This is how you set up this encounter or this part of the adventure. Okay, well, the DM needs to know this ahead of time. And a lot of us writers on the guild have learned this the hard way. And if you can pick up one of our great selling or best selling products, read it and learn what we learned just by reading that, well, then you're 2 steps ahead of where I was whenever I started writing.
Sure. Look at the WotC products, and not necessarily just speaking about writing style and descriptive style, but it's just some of the base formatting standards that WotC uses. Bolding a monster when it appears that says to the DM, okay, I need to go look up this monster in the monster manual. Italics for spells, that highlights that's the spell being cast. Wisdom, parentheses, insight, check, parentheses. The basic syntax that's standard to the game. If you bring that into your adventure, it makes your adventure look that much more professional. It also makes your adventure that much more accessible to the audience that is already expecting that. Yes. Well worth imitating some of those basic formats and syntaxes in your product.
Like what Tony said, you know, bolding the monsters, italicizing the spells, dexterity, you know, sleight of hand check or whatever. Those are things the DM keys on, and you're writing the adventure for the DM. And so those are the important things that need to be in there to say, okay, DM, you need to look for this and this and this. And, you know, when you're just sitting down and writing, you may forget that in the text that you're printing or typing. And so you need to go back and make sure that's filled in. And that's something my test readers always pick up on too. Like, did you mean to make this a dexterity check, or is this a dexterity acrobatics check? And so, you know, that just makes it so much easier for the DM to pick up on whenever they're using that adventure as a tool.
I totally agree. It's so important to get familiar with that wizard style, because in general, people don't want to learn a new thing. If you decide, well, I'm going to underline my monsters, right? Right. That is going to drive the readership who has learned from WotC bold means monsters crazy. It would drive me crazy if I bought a product and it did that. So yeah, absolutely. Just to get familiar with the writing style, I think that's important. But also for tons of other reasons, it's definitely going to help you out. MT, speaking of topics that could be entire series of podcasts, another topic you brought forth.
Yes. Interesting
NPCs.
Gotta love those.
And it's becoming clear quickly here that we are gonna need to do a third, fourth, and into infinity podcast. Maybe we'll get into the nitty-gritty about encounters next time and NPCs another, but I'd love to do like an overview, interesting NPCs. Again, how do we break the mold and come up with something interesting that isn't also a total ripoff of something else someone has already made?
Again, something I'm very much still perfecting my skills at. One of the interesting things, I think, as I'm about a year and a half into publishing adventures, creating a good NPC has become one of the things I take the most satisfaction out of. I remember hearing Chris Perkins talk a couple of years ago with Out of the Abyss and how much he enjoyed creating a couple of the NPCs there. And I can really relate to what he's saying now when the feedback comes back and people say, we really enjoyed interacting with this NPC, that's something I really take a lot of satisfaction out of, having brought a personality to life. It's one of those elements of of adventure design, I think, that you may not necessarily think of a lot if you're just playing or DMing, but as an adventure creator, it becomes increasingly important. Probably my biggest advice, and I think I'm very hit and miss still with my NPC creation, but what seems to work best for me is to paint with a small number of very broad strokes and very colourful strokes. So I've noticed myself looking at older adventures. Sometimes someone will write half a page or a page on an NPC, very intricate and detailed information. And as a DM, I found that difficult to digest and do something with. They create very subtle personality inflections there that are hard to do anything with. Whereas when I create an NPC, I'm just trying to throw together one or two handles that the DM can grab hold of, even if they are a bit tropey or a bit cliched, just something they can grab hold of and put out there, and players will know straight away what that NPC is all about. Recently, I've started to actually make a bit more use of the kind of the WotC personality model that they put together, where everyone's got the the trait, the ideal, the bond, and the flaw. And I've been defining my NPCs like in box text in that way, and that's been receiving some good feedback. Just a couple of really strong ideas that you put down there, and that's very easy for DMs to consume. So I'm probably going to play around with that for a while and see if that's the way forward. But it's as I said, I feel like a little bit of a novice when it comes to character creation as well, or NPC creation. I'd love to hear feedback from your audience and for the other guys as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, we've got some experts here in NPC creation. I think we can give you some advice. So what do you think, Jeff? What's your best NPC creation advice?
Creation advice? Boy, that's tough. I just think of a character and then I start developing him from there, or her. This goblin is tied up in a closet and he's missing his foot. Well, what about him? And so I just kind of, where'd he come from? Well, why is he there? And build off of that. And just to make it a fun, interactive NPC for the adventurers is my main goal. I want the NPC to be somebody that they're going to remember and come back to and say, yeah, that was cool. And to do that, boy, I mean, that's really tough. Sometimes I write a long list or a long description of him, and then I try and knock it down. MTs come back to me on this and says, well, you need to shorten that. That's I like that character, but you need to drop him down a little bit or try and tighten that wording up, because I do write a lot, and trying to condense that is what I want to do to make it easier for the reader to understand that NPC. And it's a difficult process to learn how to do correctly. Mm-hmm. And I'm still learning, but as far as NPC development, I think of a character and I build him in my head. It's that simple.
Tony, what about you? What's your NPC development advice?
So I don't know that there's a blueprint. That's a tough one. And I think you set up possibly an impossible challenge when you stated to create an NPC and insert it in there the qualifications of that nobody's ever seen before, or some wording such as that. Cliches happen for a reason because they work. And I would say don't be afraid of extracting or borrowing from character traits that you've seen in your favorite book and pop culture, etc. But ultimately, I think the NPC serves the story and what you're trying to accomplish at the time as well. And certainly whatever situation they're in or how did they get there, you're going to want to ask those questions to give you an idea of what that NPC's personality is like. But then also, why are they there for that particular encounter? Nettie the Invisible Ed, and this was about humor and having fun, and so playing it up as outrageous was the way to go. Anna Ray, well, honestly, she was inspired from somebody I knew in college, didn't date, but admired. Absolute friend, but she was very much inspired by somebody, and I brought her to life into my journey to the center of the Underdark. And other NPCs, quite frankly, there's a whole bunch of kobolds that are there to harass people until they get killed and killer kobolds, so that's their service, that's their purpose, so how can I make that interesting? Well, Dean Spencer inspired me to give one of them a gun, and it worked out wonderfully, but others, the sorcerers hitting and running, what their ultimate nefarious plan is and how they would serve that, drove their actions within the adventure. And of course, their interactions are not going to be friendly in that situation, but how the player characters interact in the combat situations with them should be memorable as well. And I think I pulled it off pretty well.
Sure, yeah, and I think a big thing for me is when I steal a character, because I think that's, I think it's true, right? Like, coming up with something wholly original, even if you do, on your own, you think of this, I guarantee one of your players will say, oh, that's just like X character from comic book series or movie or television show.
Exactly.
Right? One of the things that I like to do is, let's say I am taking an NPC, like the grizzled old, man, war veteran. I'll take that concept or that idea and just twist it a little bit, like maybe, and it could be a twist as simple as, now it's a woman. Right? What we know as the grizzled old man is a grizzled old grandma. And that really gets players, like, oh, that's really interesting. That's cool, or twisting the backstory in some way. So, like, you think they're really tough because they're so grizzled, but then it turns out they're really a coward or that sort of thing.
Right. Yep. That's really tough to avoid the creating a cliche character. I mean, I've been writing before, and I'm like, well, this sounds just like this other character. How do I change that? And so you just kind of have to be mindful and make the changes to make it a better character.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's very hard to create something wholly original. There are lots of archetypes there, as Tony said. They're there for a reason. I think be conscious about what you're doing, and as James said, just to add in something unexpected. So you might say, here's a character who's just like Aragorn, for example, out of the Lord of the Rings, except he's extremely greedy and lusts after wealth. You only really need to put in one strong variation, and that character will suddenly spring to life and be a completely new character. It's funny what you just mentioned there, James, too, about the grizzled old warrior. That's precisely what I did in Giant Slayer, where I had the grizzled old combat veteran, and I thought, oh, this is a real cliche, and I did exactly what you said. I turned him into a she. She became Jahia Giant Slayer, and that became a very fresh feeling character because of what had normally been a real male trope. Just by making that person female, really created a fresh and new feeling character. So take a character that you love off Game of Thrones, and just try and add one new feature, one stunning flaw into that character, and you'll probably find you've created something not wholly original, but something very fresh.
It's super fun then to do that, and it lets you then embrace the things that you love too. What do I love about X character? Well, I love these things, so let me take all of those, and then how could I love this character even more? That's usually the question I ask myself, is like, how could I make this person even cooler, scarier, funnier, whatever it is, and then try to enhance that aspect, which is really fun. This is proof. We haven't even tackled half of the things I wanted to talk about, and I feel like we just scratched the surface on the things that we did. I'd love to have you all back again. Before we go, let's talk about where people can find you. Where can people find you, Jeff?
The people can find me on the Dungeon Masters Guild. I publish under Jeff C. Stevens. I have my newest adventure out, Into the Belly of the Beast. If you're looking for something in the swamp, There's a slew of encounters in there. They're all tied together, and you can break them off and use them up in your home campaign as one-offs. It's a great product. I love it. I had a fun time writing it, and it looks fabulous.
That's awesome. And it is a great adventure, so if people want to check it out, they definitely should. It receives high marks from me and high marks from MT Black, who I saw talking about it on Facebook the other day. MT, where can people find you?
Yep, Facebook as well, on the Dungeon Masters Guild fan club. You can also follow me on Twitter at mtblack2567. Or you can leave a message for me on the DMs Guild as well, just in the comments on any of my products, and they get sent to me as well. So I'd love to hear from you.
And if you are going into the Underdark or a Kobold Den, you might find Tony Petrecka there. But if you dare not venture into those places, where else can people find you, Tony?
Sure, I am out there on the Facebook, easily reachable on the Dungeon Masters Guild fan club page. I do have an authors page on Facebook, which I believe is DM Tony Petrecka on Facebook. I'm also on Twitter at Tony Petrecka. No need for the 4587. I've got the unique name. But I'm not as active on Twitter as I am on Facebook, so Facebook is probably the way to, or the easiest place to find me. And I'll be getting my review and comments and 5-star review up on Into the Belly of the Beast very soon too. So
thank you, Tony. Thank you.
It's wonderful.
Excellent. Well, thank you all so much for joining me today. We'll post all your contact information and links to your DMs Guild products over at don'tsplitthepodcastnetwork.com. 3 amazing adventure designers. Thank you so much, and we'll have you back soon.
Excellent. Thank you, James.
Thanks. Thank you very much.
Thanks, James. Chat soon, mate.
Wow, awesome discussion with those dudes. They are quite incredible. Wealth of knowledge, which we should have them on even more often than we already do. They are great gentlemen and designers. You know, Tabletop Babble is still a new show, and your 5-star reviews on iTunes help other people find us. That is why I will read one 5-star review verbatim every episode and credit the person who left it. Even if you don't have an iTunes account, go make one. It takes 30 seconds, and then leave great reviews for all the podcasts you love. It is a serious help to them. Today's 5-star review comes from Derek Satch88, all the way in Mexico. Thank you so much for this 5-star review entitled Great Insights. Derek Satch88 says, as a person who just got into creating content for RPG games, this podcast has been very helpful and insightful. I own elventower.com, and it's been a great ride to go from zero to a small degree of recognition. Podcasts like these with valuable information are awesome to listen to while I write adventures, prep for the next game, or draw maps. So yes, thank you so much for that amazing 5-star review, Derek. And people, go check out elventower.com. There's a lot of really cool stuff on here. So glad you left a review and let me know about it. Lots of awesome maps, people. And if you want to follow me, I'm on Twitter at James Introcaso, and my blog is worldbuilderblog.me. Tabletop Babble is a show on the Don't Split the Podcast Network. Thanks to Rudy Basso for founding it with me. Our theme music, which you're listening to right now, was provided by Battle Bards. Until next time, remember that RPGs are like sex. As long as everybody's having fun, you're doing it right.